You will hear a conversation between an international student and the accommodation department. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 1 to 3.
Hello, accommodation department. How can I help you?
Do you look after accommodation for international students?
Yes, we look after accommodation for all the students.
Good. I hope you can help me then. I've only just been accepted onto a postgraduate course, and I want to know if there is any accommodation available from this September. I know it's very short notice.
Yes, it is rather late, but I'm sure we'll be able to find you something. First of all, can you give me your name and student number so that I can find you on the system?
Sure. My name is Maria Teresa Gonzalez.
Maria Teresa Gonzalez. How do you spell that?
Gonzalez.
Thank you. Got it. And your student number, please?
SHU 300715PG.
SHU 300715PG. Ah, here you are. Department of Modern Languages.
Yes, that's me.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 4 to 10.
Okay, now there are several options for postgraduate students. Firstly, there is the Trigon. This is a new block near to the station and not far from the main campus. Accommodation is what we call cluster accommodation.
What does that mean?
There's a small group of rooms, usually 6, each with its own bathroom clustered around a lounge kitchen area which is shared.
Oh, I see. That sounds good.
They are very popular. The price for these is £99 per week, and we do have some availability left. However, for postgraduate students, there are other options.
And what are they?
There's another apartment block called The Cube, located near the west gate of the campus. Accommodation there is in 1 or 2 bedroom self-contained flats.
So, the cube is self-contained? How does that work?
Well, basically, they're just like ordinary apartments. Each apartment has 1 or 2 study bedrooms with ensuite bathroom, a lounge and a kitchen.
And what is the price of those?
For the 1 bedroom, it is £180 per week, and for the 2 bedroom, it is £110 per week for each person.
And can I choose who I share with?
If you have a friend and you would like to share with them, of course, we can reserve a 2-bedroom apartment for you both. Otherwise, you just have to share with whoever else is there. Obviously, it will be another woman.
I will have to think about this. Do I have to make a decision now?
No, but we don't have much accommodation left, so I can't guarantee that there will still be availability if you leave it too long.
Yes, that's fair. I have a friend in the management department who might like to share. I will speak with her and get back to you this afternoon.
Okay, fine. Do let us know as soon as you can.
I will do. Thanks for all your help.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2.
Part 2.
You'll hear two university students discussing experiments.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hi, Al. Sorry to interrupt you when you're having your lunch, but I wanted to ask you a favour.
Oh, sure, no problem. Sit down, Josie. I've finished anyway. What do you need?
Well, I was wondering if I could ask you about the experiments we were talking about in the seminar the other day with Dr. Robinson. I'm doing my teaching practice on Thursday and Friday, and I'm a bit concerned about it. I wasn't entirely sure I understood them completely. If I don't understand them, then the pupils don't have any chance.
You mean the ones to determine the speed of sound?
Yes, that's right. Well, I think I understood the first one, but the second one was more complicated.
Yes, that's true. Well, let's check what you thought of the first one, the one that you'll have to take the kids outside for.
OK, let me see. Well, you need to get two groups to stand exactly 200 metres apart on the playing fields, and one has a bell or a loudspeaker or some other loud sound source and a flag, and the other group has a stopwatch.
Yes, although it doesn't have to be 200 meters. It's just that it makes the experiment easier the more distance between them. It depends on the space available.
Right. And the idea is that one group raises the flag at exactly the same moment as they make a noise, and the other group starts the stopwatch when they see the flag and stops it when they hear the noise.
That's it.
And then you get them to do a simple calculation of velocity equals time divided by distance.
Yeah, it's a bit low-tech and it's not very accurate, but they should be able to get within about 20% of the actual figure if they're reasonably careful.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
OK, so I understand that. It's the other one, the one with the tube I was having a few problems with. Can you just talk me through that and tell me exactly what I have to explain to the pupils?
Okay. Well, the thing to remember is that sound is a wave, and waves have both frequency and wavelength. You should start them off with exploring waves in water, and that'll introduce a few key concepts. Sound waves aren't exactly the same because they're compression waves, but it's more or less the same principle, at least for pupils at this level.
I've got some ideas for that. So they understand wavelength and frequency, and then we move on to the experiment. For that we need, let me just have a look at my notes. A long tube, a tuning fork, and a large barrel of water. Now, what do they do with those? And what's the point of it?
It's fairly simple, really. You just have to remember that velocity equals wavelength times frequency.
Ah, yes, that's the key, isn't it?
Yes, the tuning fork is manufactured to produce a sound of a given frequency. So that just leaves you one thing to measure. The pupils hit the tuning fork so that it makes a sound and hold it toward the end of the long open tube. That makes the air vibrate. They should slowly move the tube up and down. They'll find that in some positions it gets louder. That's because of resonance.
What's that again?
It's when there are a whole number of waves in the column of air in the tube. It makes it louder. They then measure the length of the column of air, and they can work out the wavelength from that.
And that's more accurate than the other experiment?
Well, it is if the pupils take an average using different tuning forks. It should be much more accurate.
Thanks, Al. That's clear to me now. I can't think of any more problems.
Just make sure that the pupils keep good records. You need to tell them how important that is. Any mistakes with the maths can be corrected later, but you don't want them to have to go back and get the data again. You probably wouldn't have time for that anyway.
Good advice, yes. I just hope it goes well in the classroom now.
Good luck.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a conversation about tea between an expert and a reporter. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Jacob. Thank you so much for coming along today.
It's my pleasure. I'm very intrigued about what a tea meditation entails exactly.
Well, it's very simple, really. I think the first thing you need to keep in mind is that it is mostly about leaving everything that you have been thinking or worrying about today to one side. Really focus on the present moment.
Oh, it sounds great. I certainly don't know very much about tea, and I'm keen to get started. But before you go into more detail, can I ask you what your favourite kind of tea is?
Well, I think the kind of tea we are going to have today is my favourite. It is pu'er tea from Yunnan province in southern China.
What makes this tea special?
Pu'er is a dark tea. The regions of Yunnan, the north of Vietnam and Laos, have one of the best climates for growing tea in the world. Pu'er is a post-fermented tea.
Oh, what is a post-fermented tea exactly?
It is a tea that has undergone a period of aging in the open air. They age the tea for days, even years. The exposure to humidity and oxygen help to oxidize the tea leaves and encourage fermentation. This changes the smell of the tea and also removes a lot of bitterness from the taste.
It sounds similar to the process of aging wine.
The process is different, but the effect of aging on the taste is certainly similar.
Does this mean the tea can be quite expensive?
Absolutely. It can be very expensive. The tea is usually pressed into balls or cakes and sold. At one time, only tea enthusiasts cared about buying these cakes, but now many people have realised that they are an investment, and so buy them like they would buy gold, because the price goes up a lot over time.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 25 to 26.
So now I want you to focus on clearing your mind of anything other than this present moment. Let go of any concerns.
OK, one slight problem. I will need to record our conversation, and I will need to take notes for the article. I plan to write about this for my newspaper. Is that OK?
Oh yes, of course. Whatever you need.
Thank you. I'll try to keep my notes to a minimum.
Good. So, Where was I? Oh yes, I think very few people really appreciate the complexity and variety of tea that exists in the world.
Right. Most people are maybe like me and just use tea bags.
Exactly, and with a tea bag, the tea is trapped inside and cannot move around freely. You can really taste the difference drinking a brewed tea that was free to move around through all the water.
So, do you ever use tea bags?
Never.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 27 to 30.
There are many different kinds of tea: white, yellow, black, green, oolong, matcha, herbal, and many others. Each one has its own unique properties. To fully experience what each tea has to offer, you must brew it in the correct way. I also believe in only drinking tea that is picked and sorted by hand, rather than using mechanical processes. Although it takes more time, the tea made by hand is so much better that it leads to an increase in the tea's sales.
But in that case, surely if there is more interest in the tea, and with the time-intensive farming process, this means there could be shortages because the demand is higher than the ability to produce it.
There were shortages for a while, but then an artificial fermentation process was developed in the 1970s, which helped to speed up the fermentation times. As I mentioned, this process has an aging effect on the taste of pu'er tea that is very similar to the effect on the taste of wine that you get from that fermentation process, though for pu'er tea today, we're talking about that artificial process.
How can they do this artificially?
The farmers gather the tea leaves into a big pile, then cover it with a large sheet or tarp. They spray water on the tea every now and then, and therefore fermentation happens faster. Usually, the tea is left for 30, 45, 60, or even 90 days still. The farmer will check the tea every few days, and just by the feel of the tea, he knows whether it is ready or if it needs more time.
Wow. That sounds like a fascinating process. I never realised that there was such a science behind producing tea.
Well, now you are ready for the best part, the tasting of it.
That sounds like a very good idea to me.
So what I will do now is boil the water, and we can begin our meditation.
What does that entail?
We need to focus on only two things. The first is your mind and body. Forget everything that you have been worrying about today. Forget about what you have to do later on, or what somebody said to you earlier. Focus on your breathing and on how your body feels. If you have aches and pains, acknowledge them. Pinpoint where there is tension in your body and try to release it.
Oh, yes. I can really feel tension in my shoulders.
Let it go. Close your eyes if that helps. Take deep breaths in and out. Soon we will drink the tea. When you drink it, think about the taste and how it feels on your tongue. Is it easy to swallow the tea, or do you need to gulp it?
Can you brew the tea leaves more than once?
Oh yes, you can brew some teas more than 10 times. Now we will shift to noble silence, focusing only on ourselves and the tea. Enjoy.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a lecturer talking about food preservation. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 37. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 37.
In today's lecture, I'd like to look at the topic of food preservation and start by asking the obvious question, why do we need to preserve food? Well, apart from keeping it fresh for our daily needs, many foods, such as fruit and vegetables, are only available at certain times of the year, so if we want to be able to eat these foods all year round, we need to preserve them. We also need to preserve food for export overseas to make sure that it doesn't perish in transit. And lastly, we need to be able to preserve food for when there are food shortages. There are a number of methods of preserving food which involve both high and low temperatures, chemicals, irradiation, and drying. Let's have a look at these in turn. In the 1870s, the French scientist Louis Pasteur showed that microorganisms in food could be destroyed by raising the temperature of the food, a process now known as pasteurization. This involves heating milk to just 65 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. A new method, the ultra-high temperature, or UHT process, involves heating milk to 150 degrees Celsius for 3 seconds. The advantage of treating milk in this way is that it lasts much longer, though I tend to feel, and I'm sure many of you would agree, that taste is somewhat sacrificed in the UHT process. Tin cans were first used in the early 1800s to store and preserve food. Just as they are now, the cans were tin-plated steel containers, and the process had the advantage of being cost-effective. Unfortunately, however, there were many early cases of food poisoning because the canning process was not fully understood at that stage. We now know the exact temperature and length of time each food needs for proper preservation, which has greatly reduced the risk of food poisoning. People living in cold climates often preserve food by burying it in the snow, and the Romans knew all about the advantages of packing food in ice. But for most people, this was not an option until the invention of the refrigerator in 1834. Today, however, refrigeration is the most important means of preserving food because the food stays fresh without needing to be treated. However, refrigeration requires an electricity supply, and unfortunately, if the power goes off, so does the food. A variety of chemicals can be added to food, and you'll find their names listed on the labels of cans and bottles. Salt is probably the oldest of all the chemical preservatives and was used by many ancient civilizations for many years. Sugar also acts as a preservative and is used to preserve jams in much the same way that vinegar is used to pickle foods. Chemical preservatives are effective, but they do not suit all foods, and the processes involved are time-consuming. Another method of preserving food is by drying it. Most foods are 75% to 90% water, so if you remove the water, the microorganisms simply can't survive. When food is dried, it not only lasts a long time, but it also becomes much lighter, which is a big advantage, as this makes it cheap to store. Though some people argue that valuable nutrients are lost in the process.
In the second part, the speaker describes the process of drying food. Look at questions 38 to 40. Now listen carefully and label the diagram.
Early methods for drying food involved cutting it into strips and hanging it in the sun or over fires. But there are now a number of more modern methods which involve the use of recent technology. One of these is known as roller drying, and it's a highly effective way of making dried foods from liquids, such as soup. Have a look at this diagram to see how it works. Well, first of all, the hot soup is poured in at one end here. The liquid spreads to form a thin layer on a heated belt. The liquid dries as it moves along. By the time it reaches the end of the belt, all the water has evaporated, leaving only dry powder. A blade then scrapes the dried material off the roller and captures it in powder form. All you have to do is add boiling water, and you have your hot soup back again, ready to drink. Another method is called freeze drying, and for those of you who still remember...
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Hello everyone, welcome to Team Art Stream. I'm RP and you are watching the Ielts Listening Test channel. I'm super excited to announce that on your demand we have started a series of writing tasks too. And if your dream is to achieve 8+, this video is for you. So are you ready? Here we go. Living in large cities today poses many problems for people. Many people live in big cities. It can create a lot of problems for people. What are these problems? What kind of problems are these? Should governments encourage more people to live in smaller towns? And is this the government duty to motivate people to live in smaller towns? This is how I have written introduction. A huge number of population resides in city today as compared to the previous times. I mean, a large number of people are living in mega cities, metro cities, big cities as compared to the past. This has led us to several problems including overcrowding. And it has created lot of problems, many problems, serious problems including overcrowding. Overcrowding is one of them. And government should take measures to control these problems. And this is the duty of the government to take some steps to control, to overpower these problems. This essay intends to analyze the problem faced by people living in large cities. This essay would analyze what kind of problems people are facing who are living in big cities. This is how I have written very nice introduction, and this is how I have written main body paragraph 1. There are a number of problems related with people resides in large cities. People who are living in big cities, they are facing lot of problems. A plethora of problems you can write over here. Nowadays, or a multitude of problems you can write. Nowadays, most common problem is pollution. And pollution is one of the most common problems over there. People have to face. Each and every head in the city has a vehicle. You can see every person in the family or in the living in the city, they are having vehicle. They travel to offices, homes and industries by vehicle. Whether they go to office, their homes or industries, they use their vehicles, which cause a lot of air, noise pollution in the cities, which can create double problems, air pollution and noise pollution as well. Old age people develop health problems due to pollution. Because of this pollution, old age people also develop so many health issues. Secondly, cities are way too much crowded that most of the city population face joblessness. Cities are way too much crowded. Nowadays, cities are more crowded, lot of crowd over there, that most of the city population, not pollution, population over here, sorry, population, faces joblessness. They face job crisis problem and resort to robbery to earn their daily basic needs. And they have no option but to do robbery like incidents to earn their livelihood, to earn their butter and bread. For example, mega cities like Mumbai, Delhi and Kolkata report thousands of robbery cases a year. This is how you can give example, which have increased by 89% as compared to previous years, and it is alarmingly increasing day by day. So these are the incidents of robberies in mega cities. So this is great problem over there. This is a big issue. This is how I have written main body paragraph 2. In my opinion, government should encourage more and more people to reside in smaller town. This would be very nice step by the government if government motivate more and more people to live in smaller town. If cities continue to get crowded by this rate, if cities are getting crowded of this rate, the given problem will not deteriorate, will not be alleviated in the coming year as well. Government can reduce the amount of living in smaller towns. What government should do, reduce the amount of living in smaller towns and give tax holidays to people who choose to live in small towns. And one more thing government should do, government should provide tax holidays to the people who like to live in smaller towns. This step will motivate people to reside in town, and this is how they will be motivated to live in smaller towns. This is how I have written conclusion. To recapitulate, the given problems can and must be improved by the governments. Government can do so many things, and these problems can be or must be improved. This problem will be deteriorated. This problem will be eradicated. If done, then the worsening situation which was anticipated in coming years can be halted. And if government takes steps, above mentioned steps, this worsening situation will be improved, or worsening situation which was anticipated, which was expected in coming years can be halted, can be stopped, can be eradicated. You can write over here. This is how you can write very impressive essay, very effective essay, and you can get desired band score. Thank you so much, but don't forget to subscribe our channel, like, comment, share, and please press the bell icon so that you can get notification of every new video. Bye bye for now. See you in my next lesson.